Where do you want to go first?
We go with the champion, right?
The champ is here.
That's what we do. We go with the Red Raiders. We go with the demonstrative? I don't know. The champ. The champ that left no doubt when playing its two most difficult games last year, which happened to be against the same team in BYU and BYU. The most difficult games on the conference slate.
Conference slate, yeah.
Yes. And left absolutely no doubt. I think beat them by an average of like 24, 25 points and allowed single digits both times, correct?
Yep.
And distance themselves in a way that you said, okay, there are multiple playoff caliber teams from the Big 12 last season. I made the case that I said Utah and BYU, I don't remember if I said anybody else, was of playoff caliber beyond Texas Tech.
You were in on Houston. You were talking up Houston.
Yeah, I mean, Houston had a nice season last year, but they weren't at all competitive with Texas Tech. And I guess Utah in their own way and BYU in their own way. This is a long way of saying the upper tier of the Big 12 was only Texas Tech last season because BYU showed in no way an ability to hang with them for an extended period of time. And it's the biggest compliment to any team in a conference that they stand alone. You can do it this season as we look forward, but last season's Texas Tech, league of their own.
Texas Tech went 12-2 last season, 8-1 in conference. They won the Big 12. They got a first-round bye. They did get shut out by your Oregon Ducks by a 23-0 margin. Yeah. We can talk about that. But, in terms of getting there, in terms of proving that this could work, I think this was a pretty successful start to things. The danger with Texas Tech, at least in terms of national commentary in this moment, is that this was an offseason dominated by Brendan Sorsby in that debacle. And thus far, the preseason has been something of a hand wave, right?
Yeah.
Well, Will Hammond's going to be the quarterback for the rest of the season, provided he's healthy. The rest of the roster is loaded, so they're still the favorite. They're still the favorite because of the pieces that they have in place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think there is a lot of room for a much more nuanced conversation around Texas Tech. I hope we can have that now.
Sure.
Because there's a lot more meat on that bone. One thing in particular that really caught my attention, because, we've been studying these teams now for a couple months. It just didn't start a week ago. Our friend Chris Level, who's been on this show, who does the Locked On Texas Tech podcast, does a great job, among many other things in the Texas Tech universe. Back in May, on his show, he made a quote about, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but something to the effect of Texas Tech is not a made man quite yet. And I thought that was interesting, because despite all of this, all of the news that has been circulating around Texas Tech and Cody Campbell and Brendan Sorsby and the roster and David Bailey, and let's pause. They can increase the spend. They can get more wins. We're still sort of in the proof of concept stage of all this. We don't know yet how repeatable the model is going to be way off into the future. It worked one year. I think there's a very good chance of it working a second year. But Chris's point is valid. They got to win something, I think, certainly on the conference level. We saw that last year. But the next step now in proving that this is a sustainable thing is going to the playoff and actually winning a game, not getting shut out at a minimum the way they did a year ago. So, like I said, there's room for more discussion around Texas Tech beyond the obvious headlines. And I think that's a big one. Like, we just can't assume that this is going to work in perpetuity because it worked so well a year ago.
Yes. Agree. We're also talking about starting points. We're also talking about a conference slate, and we can get into Texas Tech on the national level in this conversation, in a conversation down the road. What is Texas Tech building towards? Is it only contained within the Big 12? Obviously not.
No.
You're right that Texas Tech has the resources, obviously, to grow and obviously recruit through the prep ranks and recruit through the portal and build out a championship level roster, at least in the Big 12, if not nationally, depending on how the chips fall. But you're also right in that I don't know if there's a specific school that you can point to as saying, okay, they spent heavily in the portal multiple years in a row and it has worked out for them on a huge national level. You pointed out they haven't won a playoff game yet. Obviously, you walk before you can run.
Sure.
We've seen Ole Miss. We've seen teams like Oregon. We've seen teams Obviously, Indiana did it once more than twice in terms of overhauling that roster. It was not an overhaul before last season, though they did add a pretty enormous piece in the Heisman winning quarterback that they added. So if I'm going to talk about Texas Tech and any team as being a combination of quarterback and defense away from convincing me they're a playoff team. Okay. New quarterback / quarterback questions, given the Sorsby situation, now given Will Hammond's health, and what Will Hammond did and sometimes didn't show last season, and Texas Tech losing significant star power from a not just good, but great defense last season on all three levels. You look at Rodriguez, you look at Wisniewski at safety, you look at obviously Lee Hunter, Romello Height, David Bailey up front. They're trying to replace it. It looks like they're going to do a pretty good job of replacing it, but a one-to-one,
yeah, that's
the TBD for me. Now, when you look at what Texas Tech also has on offense, which is definite upside and experience along the offensive line, a really strong-looking running back room, obvious upside at receiver, there's room for error. There's margin for error that the defense doesn't have to be as excellent for this team to run away from the Big 12 competition this season. Will Hammond kind of just needs to be what Baron Morton was last season, which was fine, but nothing special. That's the bar if the defense is good, if the surrounding talent is sound, and I think we expect the coaching on offense to probably keep getting better. They need to be better in the red zone. If you're going to nitpick anything with Texas Tech in those higher leverage moments, they struggled in the red zone. And I don't think we have a lot of questions about defensive development, especially with some of the transfers that they added on all three levels. They should be in a really strong place. Schedule-wise, they play experienced arms, if that's what you're going to look at. Like with Texas Tech, you have to sort of look at like where could the struggle be. And so an experienced quarterback at Houston, at Colorado somewhat. We'll see at Arizona State. Arizona definitely. Oklahoma State definitely. Baylor experienced, but perhaps sloppy. TCU experienced, but not on this level. So there are interesting arms. There are interesting pieces to a lot of the teams that they play, but nobody can match what Texas Tech has roster-wise and momentum-wise. And so I can't imagine looking at Texas Tech as anything other than a clear contender for this conference once again.
So on the quarterback front, because we've sort of been dancing around this a little bit, Will Hammond is QB1. Will Hammond, if you believe Joey McGuire and something he said just this week as we are recording this at the Texas High School Football Coaches Convention.
Sitting next to Sark.
If you believe Joey McGuire, he said, no uncertain terms, Will's going to be ready for week one.
Right.
Even if he is not ready for week one, their first two games of the season are Abilene Christian and Oregon State game on the road.
Yep.
My sense is that both of those games are winnable with the roster that they have, regardless of who's playing quarterback. But that game that everyone is circling in week 3 is at home on a Friday night against Houston. They're going to want him back for that one because you and I think, we can talk about Houston in the next episode.
Against whom they torched on the road last season. Yeah.
Torched them. They still should be better than Houston.
Yep.
But clearly you would want your QB1 ready for that matchup.
Mm-hmm.
I am viewing the strength of this team as its running back room. I view it as Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams, both of whom went for nearly 2,000 combined yards a year ago. Quentin Joyner is also back. They're going to lean on him in some way, shape, or form until Will Hammond is fully integrated back in. Even after he is fully back and confident and firing on all cylinders, I still think the offense looks a lot like shorter, higher percentage stuff, at least for a while until they can figure out what the interplay is like between him and the receiver room. This is an excellent group of pass catchers that I don't think is getting enough love right now in the preseason. I think they can get really creative with that wide receiver room. I think the scheme can and will evolve over the course of time, provided the line does its part.
Right.
I'm most interested in that one facet of this offense. As the line grows, as Will Hammond gets a little bit more comfortable, how does that passing game evolve from start to finish? That, to me, is a story arc worth following, something that we can talk a little bit more about. Beyond that, I think you hit on all the key points, certainly on the defensive side of the ball. The only other thing worth mentioning, and again, we've alluded to this time and again throughout the course of the preseason and even back in part 1, Tech, I think, has the best roster in the conference. I can tell you for certain they have the best schedule in the conference.
It's pretty nice.
On paper, their toughest road game is Week 11 against an Oklahoma State team that we already know is rebooting. Otherwise, the toughest games are Houston, Arizona State, Arizona, and TCU. Tough opponents in some regard. All of those are at home. They don't play BYU. They don't play Utah. They don't play Kansas State. There is a Cincinnati sandwich situation, though.
Cincinnati.
Now that we're using this term, home against Arizona State, on the road against Cincinnati, back home against Arizona a little later on in the year. Maybe that's a trap game. Maybe it's not. You could convince me of anything between 8-4 and 12-0. I will split the difference and say 10-2.
Okay. The only thing I would add, because I think you're right about the upside of their skill position dudes, running back, receiver, tight end, is I'm curious as to where, if anywhere, it's Mac Leftwich, right? The offensive coordinator. What's their out pitch? What's their Excelsior? What is it that you say you do really, really well here? Not just what do the Bobs say in Office Space?
Yeah, what would you say you do here?
What would you say you do here? What would you say you do better on offense than anybody else? Because what we saw in the playoff last season, and look, you're only going to be able to do what your talent can do. And whatever talent deficiencies they had, the offensive line didn't look like it did during the Big 12 season when they had to play against Oregon's front.
Right.
And that's okay. Oregon had a very good front. But we saw that Texas Tech was in need of a very specific explosive identity. Not like explosive plays, but who are they when push comes to shove? Are they just going to run you over in a creative, violent way with this room and this offensive line? Great. Are they going to be precise and precision-based and, hit for a high batting average when they're in the red zone, where they're just like a step ahead? Third downs are just a breeze for them. They go for it on every fourth and short, and they're just pummeling teams into oblivion and just hyper efficient. Are they bombing the ball downfield? Are they super creative with the screen game and generating explosives like that? That's the thing with last year's Texas Tech offense. Maybe it was a Baron Morton thing. Maybe it was, who knows thing, an offensive line thing. But it's now going to be on this offense. If they have aspirations of being Final Four type college football playoff team, there has to be something lethal that they can point to. Like, this is who we are that will turn us from a 28-17 team into a 52-17 team. And they showed it at times against weaker Big 12 competition last year, but now they're aiming higher. And so that, I think, is a missing piece to this offense, where you saw that come up in the red zone. Yeah. They weren't a step ahead of teams. Maybe they were a little predictable in the red zone last year. That's the next step for them this year, is okay, what is it that we do in a killer way?
The other thing that I would add, then we should move on. We could talk BYU next, I guess.
Yeah.
But the bottom tier of that prediction bracket for me, 8-4. The reason that I say 8-4 is not because I am overwhelmingly thinking this is a possibility. I'm not. But something you alluded to back in part one, and something that I've been feeling but haven't really given a whole lot of voice to. There is a possibility that Will Hammond does step in as a full-time QB1 and doesn't pop.
Yeah, agree.
I don't think we can just blindly assume that, yes, this will work because we saw him have a great half against Utah. As you pointed out, I think rightfully so back in part one. There were moments where Will Hammond sort of looked aggressively average, which I think is why you bring up the point that all he needs to be is Baron Morton.
He was Morton a backup quarterback last year.
Baron Morton with a little bit more mobility.
Agreed.
I think sees them through here, but I'm not ready to just fully assume that Will Hammond is going to be the next great thing.
Yeah, look, you watch some of the tape, and he was the quarterback for that Arizona State game, and he had some incredible throws in that game. He double pumped a touchdown throw into the front corner of the end zone against ASU on a deeper crossing situation. He nailed it. He has arm talent. He has dimes within his mind and his arm. It's how often do we see that? How much is he trusted? And how much does he trust his receivers to go make plays? Because I think he will have the opportunity with his line to confidently throw the ball downfield. It's just a question to me of do we get that in his fifth best game?
No. Okay.
Because if we don't, that's when they lost 23-20 to TCU or something. I don't know if they're playing TCU. I don't have the schedule.
Yeah, they got TCU.
Yeah, something like that. So that would be the concern. That like, are you going to Will Hammond your way to 12-1 and a playoff win or two? That's like very hazy and murky to me right now.